Ava had always found the attic of her family's old Victorian house intriguing. The wooden beams, dust-laden trunks, and cobweb corners held stories from generations past, a silent archive of her family's history. On a rainy afternoon, while sorting through old photo albums, something caught her eye: a small, weathered book wedged between two wooden beams in the farthest corner of the attic. Curiosity piqued, Ava reached for it, her fingers brushing against the brittle leather cover. The title was barely legible, but as she wiped away the dust, the words "Family Chronicles" appeared, handwritten in faded ink. She carefully opened the book, and the first page revealed the name Clara Miller, a name she had never heard before. The diary's yellowed pages were filled with elegant, looping handwriting, detailing the life of this mysterious woman. As Ava read on, she discovered that Clara was a relative from a distant branch of the family tree, someone who had lived nearly a century ago. The entries were a mix of daily musings, personal reflections, and increasingly dark and cryptic notes. Ava's heart raced as she read about Clara's growing fears and suspicions about her own family, accusations of betrayal, whispers of lost fortunes, and hints at terrible secrets hidden away for decades. Unable to contain her curiosity, Ava spent hours poring over the diary, oblivious to the passage of time. With each page, she felt as though she was stepping deeper into a forgotten world, where shadows lurked behind every smile and trust was a fragile illusion. The diary hinted at a web of lies that had ensnared Clara, leading her to an untimely and mysterious end. The more Ava read, the more she felt a strange connection to Clara, as if the woman's spirit were guiding her to uncover the truth. But what truth? And why had no one in the family ever mentioned Clara or the diary before? As Ava pondered these questions, she heard footsteps on the creaking wooden stairs leading to the attic. Startled, she quickly closed the diary and turned to see her mother, Mary, standing at the entrance. "What are you doing up here?" her mother asked, a note of concern in her voice. Ava hesitated, clutching the diary to her chest. "Just looking through some old things," she replied. Her mother's eyes flicked to the diary in Ava's hands, and for a brief moment, a shadow of something, fear, perhaps, crossed her face. "Be careful with those old books, Ava," her mother said quietly. "Some things are better left undisturbed." With that, she turned and descended the stairs, leaving Ava alone in the attic, her heart pounding with unease. The next morning, Ava couldn't shake the unsettling feeling the diary had left with her. During breakfast, she decided to bring it up casually with her mother, testing the waters to see if she might know anything about it. "Mom, do you know anyone named Clara Miller?" Ava asked, keeping her tone light. Her mother looked up from her coffee, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her face before she shrugged. "Clara? That name doesn't ring a bell. Why do you ask?" Ava hesitated, unsure if she should mention the diary just yet. Instead, she opted for a vague explanation. "I found an old book in the attic, and it had her name in it. I was just curious." Her mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That house is full of old things. Probably just some distant relative we've forgotten about. You know how big our family tree is." Ava nodded, but the feeling of unease grew stronger. Her mother's response seemed too dismissive, too rehearsed, as if she were deliberately avoiding the topic. Something was definitely off. That evening, as Ava reflected on her mother's evasive answers, she couldn't help but recall a memory from her childhood. Her mother, younger and less weary, had been having a hushed conversation with Ava's grandmother. Ava had been too young to understand the words, but she remembered the fear in her mother's voice, the way her grandmother had shushed her and glanced toward the door, as if worried someone might overhear. Now, with the diary in her possession, Ava wondered if that memory was connected to the secrets Clara had written about. She decided to spend more time with the diary, hoping it would reveal more about Clara and perhaps explain the tension she sensed in her mother's response. The following evening, Ava returned to the attic, this time with a flashlight and a notebook. She was determined to document everything she found in Clara's diary, to piece together the story that had been buried for so long. As she read further, she discovered that Clara's life had been far from ordinary. The diary revealed a family embroiled in scandal, betrayal, and loss. Clara wrote about her father, a man she had once idolized, who had become cold and distant after the sudden death of her mother. Clara's entries grew darker as she recounted her father's involvement in questionable business dealings and his association with unsavory characters. There were mentions of late-night meetings in the family parlor, hushed conversations behind closed doors, and the arrival of strangers who never stayed long. Clara's fear was palpable in her writing. She suspected that her father was hiding something terrible, something that could destroy their family's reputation if it ever came to light. As Ava read these chilling accounts, a new memory surfaced: her great-grandfather, sitting alone in his study, his face shadowed by the dim light of a single lamp. Ava had peeked through the door as a child, curious about the man everyone in the family revered yet feared. He had been holding a photograph, staring at it with an expression of deep sorrow, before quickly hiding it in a drawer as her mother entered the room. Ava had never asked about that moment, but now, with Clara's diary in hand, she wondered if the photograph had been of Clara or someone else connected to the dark secrets of their family's past. Over the next few days, Ava couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that had settled over her. She continued to dig through the attic, searching for anything that might shed more light on Clara's story. In an old trunk filled with moth-eaten clothes and tarnished jewelry, Ava found an envelope addressed to her great-grandfather, sealed with a red wax stamp. The letter inside was written in the same elegant handwriting as Clara's diary, but this time, the tone was different, more frantic, more urgent. The letter was a plea for help, addressed to Clara's father. She begged him to believe her, to protect her from the dangers she had uncovered. Clara wrote of a conspiracy within the family, involving money, power, and deceit. She warned her father that if he didn't act, their family would be ruined, and she would be silenced forever. The letter ended abruptly, as if Clara had been interrupted while writing. Ava's heart pounded as she imagined the fear Clara must have felt in those final moments. Determined to find out more, Ava began to research her family's history, combing through old newspaper archives and public records. She discovered that her great-grandfather had indeed been a powerful and influential man in his time, but his later years were shrouded in mystery. There were rumors of financial troubles, business failures, and a scandal that had rocked the family's social standing. But the details were vague, and the story seemed to have been carefully buried over the years. Ava realized that Clara's fears had been well-founded. Her family had gone to great lengths to keep their secrets hidden. Ava knew she couldn't keep her discoveries to herself any longer. She needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them: her grandmother. With the diary and letter in hand, Ava visited her grandmother's house, hoping that the elderly woman would be willing to share what she knew. As she sat across from her grandmother in the cozy living room, Ava could see the age in her eyes, the weight of years filled with unspoken truths. She hesitated, unsure of how to begin, but then she handed the diary to her grandmother and watched as the old woman's face paled. Her grandmother's hands trembled as she opened the diary and scanned the first few pages. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the attic," Ava replied softly. "I thought you might know something about Clara and what happened to her." For a long moment, her grandmother said nothing, her eyes distant as if she were reliving memories she had long tried to forget. Finally, she closed the diary and sighed deeply. Clara was my sister, she admitted, her voice heavy with emotion. She disappeared when I was just a child, and no one ever spoke of her again. Ava listened intently as her grandmother shared the little she knew. Clara had been a bright, spirited young woman, but something had changed in her during the last year of her life. She became withdrawn, fearful, always looking over her shoulder as if she were being watched. Then, one day, Clara simply vanished. The family was told she had run away, but her grandmother had never believed it. "I think they did something to her," her grandmother said, tears welling up in her eyes. "Something terrible, and they've kept it a secret all these years." As her grandmother spoke, Ava felt a surge of anger and determination. She had to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. After her conversation with her grandmother, Ava felt more determined than ever to uncover the truth. She returned home and sat down to review the diary and letter once again. There had to be something she was missing, some clue that would lead her to the answers she sought. As she flipped through the pages of the diary, she noticed that one of the last pages seemed thicker than the others. Carefully, Ava peeled it apart and found a folded piece of paper hidden between the layers, a letter that Clara must have concealed there. The letter was addressed to no one in particular, but it was clear that Clara had written it in desperation. She spoke of discovering something that went far beyond simple family secrets, a connection to dangerous people who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. Clara described a meeting she had overheard, where her father and other men discussed plans that would ruin lives and destroy reputations if they were ever revealed. She pleaded for whoever found the letter to expose the truth, even if it meant risking everything. Ava's mind raced as she read the letter. Who were these men Clara had written about? And what had her father been involved in that was so dangerous? Ava knew she had to find out more, but the more she uncovered, the more she felt like she was stepping into a world where she didn't belong. A world where the rules were different, and the consequences for breaking them could be deadly. Despite the fear gnawing at her, Ava resolved to continue her investigation, knowing that Clara had left these clues for a reason. As Ava delved deeper into Clara's past, she began to realize that her family's web of lies extended far beyond what she had initially suspected. Every conversation she had with her relatives seemed to be shrouded in secrecy, with half-truths and evasions becoming the norm. Ava's once warm and trusting relationships with her family members began to fray as she sensed their growing unease around her. It was as if they knew she was getting closer to the truth and were trying to steer her away from it. The more Ava uncovered, the more isolated she felt. She could no longer confide in her mother or grandmother, as they too seemed to be guarding secrets they were unwilling to share. Even her close friends noticed a change in her demeanor, but Ava couldn't risk involving them in something that was becoming increasingly dangerous. The diary had become her only companion, guiding her through the maze of deception that surrounded her. But with every revelation, the stakes grew higher, and Ava knew she was running out of time. As the isolation grew, Ava began to question her own sanity. Could she trust her instincts, or was she being led down a path of paranoia and fear? The breaking point came one night when she found an old family friend, Mr. Taylor, waiting for her on her doorstep. He had been a trusted figure in her life, someone who had always seemed to have her best interests at heart. But as he began to talk, Ava sensed something was wrong. His questions were too probing, his concern too forced. And when he mentioned Clara, Ava's blood ran cold. "I've been following your progress, Ava," he said, his voice smooth but menacing. "And I think it's time we had a little chat about where you're headed with all this." Ava's encounter with Mr. Taylor left her shaken to the core. She realized that even those she had trusted most were now potential enemies. Determined to continue her investigation, Ava decided to take her findings to the authorities, hoping they could help unravel the mystery and bring those responsible to justice. She made an appointment with Detective Harris, a well-respected figure in the local police department, and shared everything she had discovered: Clara's diary, the letters, and her suspicions about her family's involvement in something much larger. Detective Harris listened carefully, his face betraying no emotion as Ava recounted her story. He assured her that he would look into it and promised to keep her updated. But as Ava left the station, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Days passed, and she heard nothing from Harris. When she finally tried to follow up, she was met with evasive answers and empty reassurances. It wasn't until she received an anonymous tip, slipped under her door in the dead of night, that she realized the truth. Detective Harris was on Mercer's payroll, part of the same corrupt network that Clara had tried to expose. Ava was now more isolated than ever. The very people she had hoped would protect her were compromised, leaving her to fend for herself. But rather than retreat, Ava felt a surge of defiance. She knew she couldn't trust the police, but she also knew that she couldn't stop now. Armed with the knowledge that she was being watched by both sides, Ava began to take more extreme precautions. She encrypted her communications, changed her routines, and started storing evidence in multiple secure locations. Ava was walking a tightrope, but she was determined not to fall. The sense of being watched grew stronger each day, making Ava increasingly paranoid. She started to notice the same unfamiliar faces appearing in places she frequented: at the grocery store, in the park, even at the library where she spent most of her time researching. The feeling that she was being followed was no longer just a suspicion, it had become a terrifying reality. Ava's nerves were frayed, and she found it difficult to sleep, haunted by nightmares of dark figures lurking in the shadows. One evening, as she was returning home from the library, Ava's worst fears were confirmed. She noticed a dark car trailing her at a distance, its headlights dimmed as if to avoid detection. Her heart raced as she tried to lose the car, taking sudden turns and doubling back on her route, but the car remained behind her. Panicking, Ava sped up, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. She had no idea where to go or who to trust. The only thing she knew was that she had to get away. In a moment of desperation, Ava decided to confront her pursuers head-on. She turned sharply into a deserted alley, slammed on the brakes, and jumped out of the car, her heart pounding. As the pursuing car screeched to a halt behind her, two men in dark suits emerged, their faces hidden in the shadows. "You've been asking too many questions, Ava," one of them said, his voice cold and threatening. "It's time you learned when to stop." Ava felt a surge of adrenaline as she realized they were going to silence her for good. But just as they moved toward her, a figure appeared at the end of the alley, a stranger who had been following them all along. The men hesitated, clearly caught off guard, and Ava seized the moment, fleeing into the night before they could react. The tension within Ava's family reached a breaking point as she continued her investigation. Her mother and grandmother became increasingly distant, their conversations with her strained and filled with unspoken accusations. Ava could sense their fear, their desperate attempts to maintain the fragile illusion of normalcy that had kept their family together for so long. But the more they tried to keep the truth hidden, the more determined Ava became to uncover it. One evening, during a particularly heated argument, Ava confronted her mother directly. "Why won't you just tell me what happened to Clara?" she demanded, her voice trembling with emotion. Her mother's face hardened, and for the first time, Ava saw the depth of the fear that had been driving her mother's silence. "You don't understand, Ava," her mother replied, her voice breaking. "Some things are better left buried. If you keep digging, you'll only bring more pain to this family." Ava felt torn between her love for her family and her need to uncover the truth. But as she stared into her mother's tear-filled eyes, a chilling realization struck her. Her mother wasn't just afraid for the family, she was afraid for Ava. "What aren't you telling me, Mom?" Ava asked, her voice now soft, pleading. But her mother simply shook her head, her fear too great to overcome. Ava knew that whatever secrets her mother was keeping, they were powerful enough to make her betray her own daughter's quest for the truth. Ava's investigation led her to the discovery of her distant cousin, Daniel, the young man who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Daniel had been mentioned in Clara's diary several times, and it was clear that he had been involved in something significant before his disappearance. Ava managed to track down some old acquaintances of Daniel's, who were willing to talk, albeit reluctantly. They remembered Daniel as a charismatic and ambitious young man, but also someone who had been caught up in something far beyond his control. According to them, Daniel had been involved in a business venture that had gone terribly wrong. The details were murky, but it seemed that Daniel had discovered something about the Miller family's dealings that had put his life in danger. He had confided in a few close friends, expressing his fears that he was being followed and that his life was at risk. Shortly after, Daniel vanished without a trace, and his friends had always suspected foul play, but they had been too scared to pursue the matter further. Ava realized that Daniel's disappearance was likely connected to the same conspiracy that had ensnared Clara. The parallels between their stories were too strong to ignore. She felt a deep sense of dread as she considered the possibility that both Clara and Daniel had been silenced because of what they knew. Ava's resolve hardened. She couldn't let their stories go unheard. She had to bring their truths to light, even if it meant risking her own safety. As Ava dug deeper into the events surrounding Daniel's disappearance, she stumbled upon a name that had been buried in the shadows of her family's history: James Mercer, a business associate of her great-grandfather. Mercer was a man of immense wealth and influence, known for his ruthless business practices and his ability to manipulate people to get what he wanted. The more Ava learned about Mercer, the more she realized that he had been at the center of the web of lies that had ensnared Clara and Daniel. Mercer's connection to the Miller family was far more insidious than Ava had initially suspected. He had been involved in illegal dealings, using the family's business as a front for money laundering and other criminal activities. Clara had discovered Mercer's involvement and had tried to warn her father, but it was too late. Mercer had already woven himself into the fabric of the family's operations, and any attempt to expose him would have brought ruin upon them all. Ava's discovery sent chills down her spine. Mercer was still alive, an old man now, but still wielding considerable power. She knew that confronting him directly would be dangerous, but she couldn't back down now. Mercer was the key to understanding what had happened to Clara and Daniel, and Ava was determined to bring him to justice. But as she prepared to confront the man who had caused so much pain, Ava knew she had to be careful. Mercer was a master manipulator, and she would need to outmaneuver him if she hoped to survive. Ava's investigation led her back to the family's old Victorian house, the place where she had first discovered Clara's diary. She had a hunch that there was more to be found within the walls of the house, something that had been hidden away for years. With renewed determination, Ava began to search every corner of the house, paying particular attention to areas that seemed out of place or unusual. It was during one of these searches that she discovered a hidden door behind a large, ornate mirror in the parlor. The door led to a small, dark room that had clearly not been touched in decades. Inside, Ava found a collection of documents, photographs, and personal items that belonged to Clara and Daniel. The room seemed to have been a secret meeting place, where the two had gathered evidence against Mercer and the other men involved in the family's illicit dealings. Ava carefully examined each item, piecing together the story that Clara and Daniel had tried to tell but had been silenced before they could. The most shocking discovery was a set of letters written by Mercer himself, addressed to Ava's great-grandfather. The letters revealed Mercer's involvement in the disappearance of Daniel and his plans to eliminate anyone who threatened to expose his crimes. Ava felt a surge of anger as she read the letters. Mercer had not only ruined her family but had also been responsible for the deaths of those who had tried to stop him. Ava knew she had to act quickly. She had the evidence she needed to take down Mercer, but the question was, how? As Ava began to gather the evidence she had found in the hidden room, she received a chilling message. A letter was delivered to her home, with no return address. The contents of the letter were clear and direct: "Stop now, or you'll end up like Clara and Daniel." Ava's blood ran cold as she realized that whoever was behind the letter knew exactly what she was doing. The threat was real, and she was in more danger than ever before. The letter forced Ava to confront the reality of her situation. She was no longer just uncovering family secrets. She was in the middle of a dangerous game with people who were willing to kill to protect their interests. Ava considered going to the police, but she knew that without solid proof, her claims would be dismissed as the ramblings of a paranoid woman. She also feared that the police might be compromised, given Mercer's extensive influence. Despite the threat, Ava couldn't bring herself to stop. Clara and Daniel had sacrificed everything to try to expose the truth, and Ava couldn't let their efforts go to waste. But she also knew she needed to be smarter, more cautious. She started encrypting her communications, storing copies of the evidence in multiple locations, and confiding only in a trusted few. Ava was walking a tightrope, and one misstep could cost her everything. But the truth was worth the risk, and she was determined to see it through. Ava's caution wasn't enough to protect her from the treachery that lurked within her own circle. One of the people she had confided in, someone she had trusted completely, betrayed her. It was a calculated move, designed to isolate Ava further and make her more vulnerable. The betrayal struck Ava hard, leaving her reeling and questioning her own judgment. How could she have been so blind? The person who had turned against her had been by her side from the beginning, and now she realized that they had been feeding information to her enemies all along. The betrayal not only put Ava in greater danger but also destroyed the last vestiges of trust she had in those around her. She was now truly alone, with no one she could turn to for help. The realization was devastating, but it also steeled her resolve. Ava knew that she couldn't afford to let her guard down again. The stakes were higher than ever, and she would have to rely on her own wits and instincts to survive. As Ava severed ties with the betrayer, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She remembered moments from her childhood, times when this person had been a source of comfort and guidance. The betrayal cut deeper because it wasn't just about the present, it was a betrayal of a shared history, of memories that had once been cherished. But those memories were tainted now, and Ava knew she had to let them go. She moved quickly to protect herself, changing her plans and securing the evidence she had gathered in new, undisclosed locations. Ava was ready to fight back, no longer as the naive girl who had discovered a diary, but as a woman determined to bring down the man who had destroyed her family. As Ava continued to unravel the web of lies, she discovered a crucial connection that linked Clara, Daniel, and the entire conspiracy. It was a ledger hidden among the documents in the hidden room, detailing financial transactions that traced back to her great-grandfather's business dealings with Mercer. The ledger was filled with coded entries, but Ava was able to decipher them with the help of an old cipher key she found in Clara's belongings. What she uncovered was a money trail that implicated not only her great-grandfather but also several prominent figures in the community. The ledger revealed that Daniel had been trying to expose a massive embezzlement scheme orchestrated by Mercer and his associates. Clara had discovered this as well and had tried to warn her father, but by then, Mercer's influence had spread too far. Daniel's disappearance and Clara's subsequent vanishing were directly tied to their efforts to bring this corruption to light. The realization hit Ava like a ton of bricks. Her family had been complicit in crimes that had ruined lives, and the cover-up had been meticulously maintained for decades. As Ava processed this revelation, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about her family. Memories of family gatherings, once filled with warmth and laughter, were now tainted with suspicion. Ava recalled a specific moment when her great-grandfather had pulled her aside at a family reunion, his eyes filled with a sadness she hadn't understood at the time. "Promise me you'll always protect this family," he had said. Ava now realized the weight of that promise. It wasn't about love or loyalty, it was about keeping the family's dark secrets buried. The ledger was the final piece of the puzzle, and Ava knew she had to act. She had the evidence she needed to take down Mercer, but the risks had never been higher. With the ledger in her possession, Ava knew that time was of the essence. She contacted a journalist she had met during her research, someone she trusted to handle the story with the care and seriousness it deserved. They arranged to meet in a public place, where Ava handed over copies of the ledger and the letters she had found. The journalist was shocked by the scope of the corruption and promised to start working on the story immediately, but they warned Ava that she needed to be careful. This was a dangerous game, and the people involved wouldn't go down without a fight. As Ava left the meeting, she felt a sense of relief, but also a gnawing fear in the pit of her stomach. She had done everything she could to expose the truth, but now it was out of her hands. She knew that the next few days would be critical, that her enemies would be scrambling to cover their tracks and that they might come after her to silence her once and for all. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, but she also knew she had no choice but to see this through to the end. That night, Ava received a phone call from the journalist. Their voice was tense, filled with urgency. "Ava, you need to get out of there," they warned. "I've been getting calls from people I trust. They're saying that Mercer knows about the ledger, and he's not going to let this go. You're in real danger." Ava's heart pounded as she listened, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. She had exposed the truth, but now her life was in jeopardy. Ava knew she had to act fast. Mercer wouldn't stop until he had silenced her, just as he had silenced Clara and Daniel. As Ava packed her belongings, her mind raced with thoughts of her family. She realized that this was the last time she might see them, the last time she would be able to say goodbye. A flood of memories washed over her, her mother singing lullabies, her grandmother's stories by the fireplace, the laughter of cousins at summer picnics. These memories had once been a source of comfort, but now they were tinged with sorrow. Ava knew that by exposing the truth, she had shattered the illusion that had held her family together. But she also knew that living a lie was no longer an option. She had to protect herself, even if it meant leaving everything she had ever known behind. The revelation of the conspiracy sent shockwaves through the community. The journalist published the story, complete with the evidence Ava had provided, and it quickly became the talk of the town. Mercer's name was splashed across the headlines, along with those of his associates, as the full extent of their crimes was exposed. The scandal rocked the foundation of the local society, with arrests being made and reputations being destroyed overnight. But for Ava, the victory was bittersweet. She had accomplished what Clara and Daniel had died trying to do. She had exposed the truth and brought justice to those who had been wronged. But the cost had been high. Ava's life was in ruins. She had lost the trust of her family, been betrayed by those she thought were friends, and now lived in constant fear for her safety. The aftermath of the revelation left Ava feeling hollow, as if the victory had come at too great a price. She couldn't help but wonder if it had all been worth it. As Ava walked through the now empty streets of her hometown, she was struck by how much had changed. The once vibrant community was now fractured, its people divided by the fallout of the scandal. Ava overheard whispers as she passed by, some filled with admiration, others with scorn. She knew that no matter what she had done, she would always be seen as the one who had torn the town apart. But despite the pain, Ava found solace in the knowledge that she had done the right thing. The truth had to be told, no matter the consequences. And while the journey had cost her everything, Ava knew she had finally found a sense of peace in the midst of the chaos. As the fallout from the scandal continued to unfold, Ava realized that her life was no longer safe. Mercer and his associates might have been exposed, but they still had resources and connections that could be used against her. Ava knew that she had to leave town, at least for a while, to protect herself from any potential retaliation. The thought of leaving her home and her family behind was painful, but Ava understood that it was the only way to ensure her safety. She began to make preparations in secret, packing only what she needed and making arrangements to stay with a friend in a distant city. Ava didn't tell anyone where she was going, not even her mother or grandmother. It was too risky, they could be coerced or followed, and Ava couldn't afford to take that chance. The night before she left, Ava visited Clara's grave, a small, unmarked plot in the old family cemetery. She placed a single white rose on the grave and whispered a silent promise to Clara, vowing to live her life in a way that would honor the sacrifice Clara had made. As Ava walked away from the cemetery, she couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. She knew that by leaving, she was saying goodbye not only to her family but also to the life she had known. The memories of her childhood, once filled with warmth and love, now seemed distant and out of reach. Ava realized that she was stepping into a new chapter of her life, one that would be defined not by the lies of the past but by the truth she had fought so hard to uncover. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face it, no matter what challenges lay in store. Ava's escape didn't go unnoticed. Despite her careful planning, Mercer's associates managed to track her down. One evening, as she was settling into her new life in the city, Ava received a visit from a man who claimed to be an old friend of her great-grandfather. He was polite, well-dressed, and spoke with the kind of authority that immediately put Ava on edge. The man made it clear that he knew exactly who she was and why she had left town. He offered her a choice: walk away from the investigation and disappear, or face the consequences of her actions. Ava knew that this was Mercer's final attempt to silence her, but she refused to back down. She confronted the man, telling him that the truth was already out and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The man's demeanor shifted, his polite exterior cracking to reveal the menace underneath. He warned Ava that she had no idea what she was dealing with, that the people she had exposed were just the tip of the iceberg. There were others, more powerful and more dangerous, who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her if she continued to be a threat. The confrontation escalated quickly, with Ava realizing that she was in grave danger. The man's threats became more explicit, and Ava knew she had to act fast. In a moment of desperation, she managed to escape, fleeing through the back streets of the city with the man hot on her heels. The chase was intense, with Ava's heart pounding as she navigated the dark alleys and abandoned buildings. She knew that this was it, the moment that would determine whether she lived or died. And as she finally managed to lose her pursuer, Ava felt a surge of adrenaline and relief. She had survived, but just barely. Ava knew that she couldn't keep running forever. The confrontation with Mercer's associate had been a wake-up call. She needed to find a way to disappear completely, to start a new life where no one could find her. With the help of the journalist who had published her story, Ava arranged to leave the country, to start over in a place where Mercer's influence couldn't reach her. It was a drastic step, but Ava knew it was the only way to stay safe. Leaving everything behind was harder than Ava had anticipated. She had to cut ties with everyone she knew, including the few friends who had supported her during the investigation. The thought of never seeing her family again was painful, but Ava understood that it was a necessary sacrifice. She had to protect herself, and the only way to do that was to disappear completely. With a heavy heart, Ava boarded a plane to a distant country where she hoped to find peace and safety. As the plane took off, Ava looked out the window at the fading lights of the city below. She felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, fear, and hope. She had done what she needed to do, but the cost had been high. Now, as she embarked on this new chapter of her life, Ava knew that she would have to live with the consequences of her choices. But she also knew that she had done the right thing, that she had honored Clara's memory and brought justice to those who had been wronged. Ava's new life was far from easy. She had to adapt to a foreign country, learn a new language, and find a way to support herself. But despite the challenges, Ava found a sense of peace in her new surroundings. She was free from the shadows of her past, free from the fear that had haunted her for so long. For the first time in years, Ava felt like she could breathe, like she could live without constantly looking over her shoulder. She found work in a small bookstore, where she spent her days surrounded by the comforting smell of old books and the quiet hum of daily life. It was a far cry from the chaos and danger she had left behind, but Ava welcomed the simplicity of her new existence. She made a few friends, people who knew nothing of her past and accepted her for who she was in the present. Slowly, Ava began to rebuild her life, finding joy in the little things and discovering a strength within herself that she hadn't known she possessed. But even in this new life, Ava couldn't entirely escape the memories of what had happened. The nightmares still came, though less frequently, and there were moments when she found herself looking over her shoulder, expecting to see a shadow from her past. But as time went on, those moments became fewer and farther between. Ava knew that she would never forget what she had been through, but she also knew that she couldn't let it define her. She had a new life now, and she was determined to make the most of it. Years passed, and Ava gradually built a life for herself in her new home. The memories of the past faded into the background, though they never entirely disappeared. She had managed to find a sense of peace, and for the most part, she had moved on. But one day, out of the blue, Ava received a package in the mail. There was no return address, and the handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar. With a sense of trepidation, Ava opened the package to find a small box containing an old photograph and a letter. The photograph was of Clara, smiling warmly at the camera, with a younger Ava in her arms. Ava was shocked. She had no memory of this moment, and the photograph seemed to have been taken long before Clara's disappearance. The letter, written in Clara's handwriting, was short and to the point. Ava, you were always meant to find the truth. I'm so proud of you. But there's one last thing you need to know. The letter went on to describe a final secret that Clara had uncovered, a truth so devastating that it had been kept hidden even from the rest of the family. The revelation rocked Ava to her core. Clara had discovered that Mercer wasn't just a business associate, he was Ava's biological grandfather, the result of an affair he had had with Ava's grandmother before she married into the Miller family. The truth explained why Mercer had been so determined to keep Ava from exposing him. She was his own flesh and blood, and he couldn't risk the scandal that would come if the truth were revealed. Ava's world was turned upside down once again. as she grappled with the implications of this final revelation. The final revelation forced Ava to confront the past once again. She realized that she couldn't continue to live her life in hiding, that she needed to return home and face the truth head-on. With a heavy heart, Ava made the decision to go back to the town she had fled years before. She knew that it wouldn't be easy, that there would be questions and accusations, but she also knew that she couldn't run from her past forever. The truth had to be faced, no matter how painful it might be. When Ava returned to her hometown, she found that much had changed. The scandal had faded from the public's memory, and life had moved on. But for Ava, the wounds were still fresh. She sought out her mother and grandmother, hoping to find some semblance of reconciliation. To her surprise, they welcomed her back with open arms, though the pain of the past was still evident in their eyes. They too had suffered in her absence, and they were ready to start healing together. Ava knew that the road to healing would be long and difficult, but she was ready to take the first steps. She confronted the people who had betrayed her, finding a sense of closure in the knowledge that they no longer held any power over her. She also confronted Mercer, now an old and frail man, who could no longer hide behind his wealth and influence. The confrontation was difficult, but it allowed Ava to finally let go of the anger and resentment she had carried for so long. She had come full circle, and now it was time to move forward. With the final secrets of her family exposed, Ava felt a sense of liberation. The truth, once so painful and destructive, had finally set her free. She no longer felt the weight of the lies that had burdened her for so long. The community, once so eager to gossip and judge, had largely forgotten the scandal, and Ava found herself able to walk through the town without the stares and whispers that had once haunted her. The truth had been a bitter pill to swallow, but it had also brought a sense of clarity and purpose to Ava's life. Ava decided to share her story with the world, not to seek fame or recognition, but to ensure that the lessons of her family's history would not be forgotten. She wrote a book detailing the events that had transpired, from the discovery of Clara's diary to the final confrontation with Mercer. The book was a cathartic experience for Ava, allowing her to process the emotions and experiences that had shaped her journey. It also served as a warning to others about the dangers of secrets and lies, and the importance of truth and transparency. As the book gained attention, Ava received messages from people all over the world who had been touched by her story. Some shared their own experiences with family secrets and betrayal, while others simply offered words of support and encouragement. Ava was humbled by the response, and it gave her a sense of purpose that she had never felt before. She realized that her story had the power to help others, to inspire them to seek the truth and to find the strength to confront their own demons. In sharing her story, Ava had found a way to turn her pain into something meaningful and positive. As Ava looked back on the journey she had taken, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the losses she had endured, anger at the injustices that had been done, and regret for the time that had been lost. But there was also a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that she had done the right thing, that she had honored Clara's memory and brought justice to those who had been wronged. Ava knew that the past could never be changed, but she also knew that she had the power to shape her future. Ava reflected on the impact that her journey had had on her life. She had been forced to grow and change in ways she had never imagined, and she had discovered a strength within herself that she hadn't known existed. The experiences she had gone through had forged her into a different person, someone who was no longer afraid to stand up for what was right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Ava realized that the journey had been as much about self-discovery as it had been about uncovering the truth. As she sat in her small, cozy home, surrounded by the books and mementos that had come to define her new life, Ava felt a sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place where she could finally be at ease with herself and her past. She knew that there would always be challenges and obstacles to overcome, but she also knew that she had the strength and resilience to face them. Ava had come through the fire, and she had emerged stronger for it. Ava's return to her hometown marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She spent time reconnecting with her mother and grandmother, slowly rebuilding the relationships that had been fractured by the events of the past. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and pain, but there was also a growing sense of understanding and forgiveness. Ava knew that the wounds would never fully heal, but she also knew that they could begin to mend with time and effort. As part of her journey toward closure, Ava decided to visit the graves of Clara and Daniel. She had always felt a strong connection to Clara, and now, standing before her grave, Ava felt a deep sense of gratitude. Clara had been the catalyst for everything that had happened, and without her courage, the truth would have remained buried forever. Ava knelt by the grave and placed a hand on the cold stone, whispering a quiet thank you to the woman who had started it all. Ava also visited Daniel's grave, which had been neglected for years. She arranged for it to be cleaned and properly cared for, as a gesture of respect for the man who had tried to do the right thing, even at great personal cost. Ava felt a sense of closure as she stood by Daniel's grave, knowing that she had done everything she could to honor his memory. The past would always be a part of her, but she no longer felt bound by it. Ava was ready to move forward, to embrace the future with an open heart and a clear conscience. With the past finally laid to rest, Ava was ready to start anew. She decided to stay in her hometown, but she no longer felt the need to hide or run away. Instead, she embraced her identity and her history, using her experiences to build a life that was meaningful and fulfilling. Ava found work at a local community center, helping others who were struggling with their own challenges. She discovered a passion for giving back, for using her knowledge and skills to make a positive difference in the lives of others. Ava also began to rebuild her social life, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. She no longer felt the need to keep people at arm's length, and she found joy in the simple pleasures of companionship and shared experiences. Ava's life was no longer defined by the secrets and lies that had once consumed her. Instead, it was defined by the choices she made and the values she held dear. As she looked to the future, Ava felt a sense of optimism that she hadn't felt in years. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place of peace and fulfillment. Ava knew that there would always be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them with courage and determination. She had come through the darkness and had found the light on the other side. Now, it was time to live fully, to embrace the possibilities that lay before her, and to create a life that was truly her own. Despite the peace and fulfillment Ava had found in her new life, the past continued to cast a long shadow. The revelation of the family secrets had not only affected Ava but had also had far-reaching consequences for the community. Some people resented Ava for exposing the truth, blaming her for the scandal and the disruption it had caused. Others saw her as a hero, someone who had the courage to stand up against corruption and deceit. But no matter how people viewed her, Ava knew that she could never fully escape the legacy of her family's history. The consequences of Ava's actions began to manifest in unexpected ways. Some of the people she had once trusted turned against her, unable to forgive her for the pain she had caused. Even though Ava had acted out of a sense of duty and justice, she couldn't help but feel the sting of rejection and betrayal. It was a reminder that doing the right thing often came with a cost, and that not everyone would understand or appreciate the sacrifices she had made. But Ava also found support in unexpected places. People who had been affected by the scandal reached out to her, expressing their gratitude for bringing the truth to light. Some of them had been victims of the corruption that had plagued the community, and they saw Ava as a beacon of hope. Their stories gave Ava a renewed sense of purpose, and she realized that her journey was far from over. There were still battles to be fought, still truths to be uncovered, and Ava was ready to continue the fight, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As Ava looked back on everything that had happened, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what she had accomplished. She had taken on a powerful and corrupt system, and she had won. But the victory had come at a cost, and Ava knew that the legacy of her actions would continue to shape her life for years to come. She had become a symbol of resilience and courage, but she had also become a target for those who resented her for exposing the truth. Ava decided to embrace her legacy, using it as a platform to advocate for justice and transparency. She became involved in local politics, pushing for reforms that would prevent the kind of corruption and deceit that had plagued her family for so long. Ava's work earned her both praise and criticism, but she remained steadfast in her commitment to doing what was right. She had learned that the truth was a powerful weapon, and she was determined to use it to make the world a better place. As she stood on the steps of the courthouse, looking out at the crowd gathered to hear her speak, Ava felt a sense of fulfillment that she had never known before. She had come full circle, from the scared and uncertain young woman who had discovered a hidden diary, to a confident and determined advocate for change. The legacy of her family's history would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. Ava had found her own path, and she was ready to walk it with courage and conviction. The journey was far from over, but Ava was ready for whatever lay ahead.